Welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Arts in the Schools grants for fiscal year 2021, which for us runs from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. I am Carolyn Koska, the Financial and Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And first I'll just run through what we are going to talk about today. We'll start out with just a quick overview of our organization. Then we'll take a look at the guidelines for this grant program. We'll move over onto our website, show you what's available for you there. We'll go into the grant system and walk through the application so you know what to expect. And then we'll finish up by talking about the whole grant process, basically what happens after you submit an application. So it looks like everyone is muted right now. We are going to stop a couple places to ask questions during this hour here. And also if you would rather, you can type questions into the chat window. And then at the end, I will unmute everyone then and we can talk directly too. So the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services, which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. You can see our region down here in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. Our funding comes from mostly the state. One part of that comes as an allocation through their general fund, and the bulk of it comes from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for our grants for individual artists. And finally, through our membership program, we receive funding from individuals, organizations, counties in our region. Some things that we are committed to are supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So these are some things to keep in mind as you're thinking about what kind of project you might like to do, because everything needs to kind of come back to these commitments. Our Arts in the Schools grant program is open to public schools in the 18 counties of our service region, which are listed here. Also, we acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people, who have stewarded these lands throughout the generations. There are 4 types of projects that you can do under this grant program, which are artist residencies, juried student art exhibits, arts field trips, and prepackaged theater experiences. And we'll take a look at each of those in a moment. All of these projects need to be open to all students within a grade or a subject discipline or an activity. So these projects should not be exclusive to just a student organization or to specific students selected by faculty. For artist residencies, which are learning partnerships between an artist and a school, these can involve any arts discipline. Some things that your residency should have: a professional artist or arts organization who's going to come work with your school, a core student group that will be receiving extended in-depth artist contact. So this means that maybe the artist who's coming in is meeting with your 5th graders for a certain amount of time every day for a week. So that's that core student group that's receiving that in-depth artist contact. And then maybe also the artist does some sort of presentation for the whole school. We're hoping that you will plan in some artist and teacher time for planning and training related to this project. A teacher should be present during that artist-student contact time. And we're also looking for a community component to be able to share that experience that the students had with the community. So that might be something like a concert or an exhibit. Residencies are looking different these days. We recently funded a project that was a virtual residency. So that may be something to think about or to just be planning further ahead. The next type of project you could do is a juried student art exhibit. Your school or a group of schools could bring in professional artists to jury a student show. You could also have student music performances involved in the part that may be open to the public. Again, this is something that may look different right now, but the grant funds could pay for those artists who are going to act as the jurors. You could advertise the show in the community, give out student awards, etc. And one grant is allowed per show regardless of the number of schools involved. Next project type are arts field trips, which would include visits to artist studios, performances by professional theater, dance, or musical groups, art galleries, even to art schools. Again, this may not be possible at the moment, but you can be thinking ahead. And our fourth project type are prepackaged theater experiences, which would be things like bringing in a theater company like Prairie Fire or Missoula Children's Theater into your school. The theater company sends a couple of actors who run the week-long workshop. They bring along everything that you need. And by the end of that week, the students have put together a play. So as far as grant amounts available for the artist residency, you can request up to $4,000. And for each of the other three, you can request up to $2,500. And no cash match is required for the artist residencies, juried art exhibits, or field trips. That means that the school is not required to put up any of their own funds or find other funds if the cost of the project is within the amount they can request for the grant. And then for this current year, we are also not requiring a match for the prepackaged theater projects. Usually there's some ticket income coming in there, so that would provide the most of your match. But as I said, that is not required this year. Some eligibility items to be aware of, and these are all things that are not eligible for these grants. We cannot accept requests from parochial schools since we are using state funds for these grants. You cannot pay school personnel unless you are paying a substitute teacher while the regular teacher is involved in the project. The project cannot be a substitution for regular school programming. Even if your school has canceled one of its arts programs, if this project is covering things that would normally have been part of that art curriculum, that is not allowed. You also cannot apply for supplies outside of those that are needed for this specific project. And then obviously projects that don't have an art focus are not eligible. Neither are activities that take place outside of Minnesota, again, because we're using those state funds. Activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, fundraising events, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, grant funds being used to match another SMOC grant, and applicants with past due final reports. So those are all ineligible to apply for these grants. It's a good idea to check the program guidelines, and we also have some general grant guidelines that apply to all of our grants, just to check those for some more details about eligibility, and I'll show you later where you can find those. For your project, you're going to need to come up with a start date and an end date. We consider your project to be started as soon as you're doing things like paying any fees or deposits on contracts, ordering supplies, holding auditions or rehearsals, or doing any advertising. So because of that, your start date should not be the date of your first activity or event, since you can't spend any funds before that project start date. You need to make sure that you allow yourself enough time to do all of those kind of preparation tasks. So if there you have something that you really do need to spend this money before your project start date, if you have to put a deposit on a contract, you just are not allowed then to include that amount in your grant budget. And again, no advertising by the applicant can take place before the start date. You'll also need to choose a project end date, and all projects that are awarded in this year, our fiscal year 21, must be finished up by June 30th, 2022. So you do have some time to be working on your project. We have 2 deadlines per year for this grant program. The first one we have already passed. That was October 14th, and that was for projects starting December 1st or later. And we have our round 2 coming up soon with a deadline on January 27th, and that is for projects starting March 1st or later. So this round 2 is the round you need to apply in if you're planning to do something very late spring or fall of the next year. Round 1 is the best time to apply for things happening in the spring of the year. I'll also call your attention to the fact that all applications need to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. on the deadline date. The system will not allow you to submit an application after that time. I just saw a question come through about start dates. Let's take a look at that. So the question, when do the funds have to be spent on round 2? So regardless of whether you're applying in round 1 or round 2, they all have to be spent by June 30th, 2022. So just any grants awarded within that year have that same date for when they need to be used by. So you'll need to have 2 people who are associated with your project. One is the project director, and this is probably going to be the classroom teacher or the arts teacher that is involved in the project. Sometimes they're also the person who is writing the grant, but it does not have to be. Whoops, went too far. And then you'll need an authorizing official, and this would be your principal or superintendent or someone else who has authorizing power for your school. And both of these people will need to sign your application, your contract, and final report, and they cannot be the same person. We need to have 2 different people involved in this project. So we'll stop again here for some questions. I saw a follow-up question come through about the date when funds need to be spent. If that date includes the final report. And no, that does not include the final report. So your actual end date of your project could be June 30th, 2022, and then you still have time after that to complete your report. And I am just gonna make sure people can all be unmuted and just pause for a couple minutes here if there are any other questions at the moment.
Hi, this is Janine. I was just clarifying the 2022. So if it's awarded in 2021, we have a whole year to use it. Is that correct? Because you said 2022.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
hmm
And then will there be a round for grants next fiscal year as well?
Yep, so we have generally had 2 rounds of this every year.
Okay.
So for the time being, yes, you can plan on that, those deadlines happening at similar times next year.
Okay. Thank you.
hmm
I have a question too. So if there are additional grants next year and one is awarded for the 2021 deadline, could there be another follow-up grant? I think you can kind of build on projects if you have a visiting artist and do 2 grants in concession. Is that true or not?
Sure. Yeah, you can. It's probably a good idea to not be trying to run 2 projects at the same time, but it's definitely fine to have to apply again. And we've also had schools with different departments that are running projects at the same time, which is fine also.
That was going to be my next question because I know we're interested in applying for the Prairie Fire and then also possibly do an artist in residency application. Can we submit more than one per school?
Yes, you can. Just to be aware that if money ends up being tight, you may be really competing against yourself, but there isn't anything against applying for multiple projects.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at the moment? All right, then we will move on and move over to our website. And so there are a couple of places on our website where you can get to the online grant system that you'll need to use to apply. One is on the home page. If you just scroll down past those slides, there's this black grant box here, and that's got a login button that'll take you right to the system. And then each of the grant pages also has a button, which we'll look at in a moment. So we're looking at our school grants here, and I'm just going to point out we have this other link available here. This is the Compass Roster of Artists. That's an organization out of the Twin Cities that maintains a roster of teaching artists. So we'll just take a quick look at that. Here is their website. And we are going to just look at their teaching artists that they have listed here. And you can, if you want, choose a category to look at. And then they've just got listings of all of the artists who are available to do residencies with your schools. We'll just take a look at one of them here. And so each of these little profiles talks about the artist and their background, and then gives some examples of what kinds of residencies they are able to do, along with some information about age range, etc. So this is a great place to discover artists who are available to come into your school, and you can contact them through the Compass website. And we will move on to our page here for Arts in the Schools grants. And here's this other button that I was talking about that'll take you to the grant system. It says apply now, but it really just takes you to the login, and it doesn't matter which page you click that from. So on this page, we've got some important dates for you for both of the rounds that we have. So you can check that deadline date and kind of look at some other important dates during the decision process. And then it reminds you of the earliest project start date for that round as well. Then we've got some materials here. Here are the grant guidelines that we were talking about earlier. These are the ones for specifically for Arts in the Schools grants. These are our general guidelines that apply to all of our grant programs. We have the application questions here for you in a Word document. Some people like to work in that when they're working on their draft and then later paste things into the grant system. And that's just there if that's a way that you like to work. Otherwise, you can feel free to work right in the online application. We've got links to budget forms here, the criteria that will be used to score your application. You can also take a look at the questions you'll be asked in the final report if you want to know what kinds of things you'll have to report on. And then we have a couple of tutorials here for you. This video tutorial is just a quick overview of the system, and this PDF guide goes into more detail. So we are going to go ahead and log into the system. If you already have an account in the system, you could just go ahead and log in. If you are totally new, you can click create a new account here, and that will walk you through that. If you're not sure whether you or someone from your school already has an account, please contact us and we can let you know and get things set up correctly for you. But we are just going to log in here. So if you are returning to the system, you'll come to your applicant dashboard, and this lists everything that you are currently working on. But if you are coming into the system for the first time, it'll take you directly to this apply page. And you'll just need to scroll through all of the current grants that we have available to find. Here's the arts in the schools, just an overview of details on that one. If you'd like to take a look at the application without actually starting anything, you can click this preview button. Otherwise, click the blue apply button to get started. Then I'll just point out a couple buttons you'll see when you get in there. This drop down that says select language, we'll use Google Translate to translate the interface and questions into another language, if that is what you need to work in. Then we have this copy previous answers button. This is very helpful for people who have worked in the system before. What happens is if you click on this, it'll bring up all of your previous applications, and you can choose one of those to copy answers from to kind of give you a head start on your next application. It will copy answers for questions that are the same in both applications. Each year, our applications are kind of tweaked a little bit, so there might be a few things that don't come over, but that, like I said, is a great head start. Then we have this collaborate button, and this allows you to invite someone to work on the application with you. You will type in their email address here. You can decide what level of permission you want to give them. And then in this message, you can let them know what you'd like them to work on. If they are working on the budget for you, or you just are asking them to proofread or fill in some other data, you can let them know. Just click this invite button. They will get an email, and then all they need to do, if they don't already have an account in the system, is create a password. And they can convert that over to a full account later if they'd like to, but just that password is all that they would need to do. Then just as you're getting started, some reminders of what you can do if you need some help. If you would like to schedule some time to talk with me, you can just click here and it will take you to this system that'll help you schedule that. You can just pick how you'd like to meet. And then it allows you to choose a time on my calendar. Or you can email me at any time with questions. The first thing you can fill in is a name for your project. As you see in these examples, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just something that describes what you are doing. Here's where you will enter in what you're requesting. You'll probably want to wait to do that until you have filled out your budget form. We've got some links here to the guidelines again, application questions, scoring criteria. It also points out that you'll see all of these fields have a very large character limit, and we really are not expecting you to come anywhere near to filling that up. We want to make sure there's enough space if on some question, there's really a lot you have to say, but the reviewers do really appreciate concise answers. So please don't feel that you need to add in some extra just to fill that up. Next thing you'll do is choose which type of project you are going to do. When you choose this, it'll change a couple of the options for some things that you have to fill in, and we will eventually look at all of these and what's different for them. But for now, I'm just going to click Artist Residency. And you will describe your project. And it asks that in addition to explaining the activities that are going to take place, which students will be participating in the project. Are they in a particular school building, grade, or subject? And then when will the activities take place? If you know kind of the dates and the daily schedule and which group of students is participating in which activity, that is great information to include. Next are your start and end dates, and there are reminders here of the rules for those. Then we come to your budget form. What you'll do is click this link and it will bring up a PDF budget form for you to fill out. You can put your project title in there again. And it's got some different categories of expenses that you might have. You can describe those here and then enter some amounts. And you'll see that it is totaling for you. As you go down to the bottom, it'll total your cost here. And then you will enter in the amount you'd like to request with some reminders of what those limits are for the different project types. And then if your cost is more than the amount that you can request, just down here, you'll enter in some other funds that you might be using to cover that so that we know the full cost of the project will be covered. So you would save this and then you will upload that into your application. When you click on this button, it just brings up your files on your computer. And then you can just choose the file and that'll upload that for you there. There's a narrative field. So if you are trying to explain your amount of bus mileage, you've got room to show how you came up with that cost, etc. This next section, the artistic quality and merit section, is one that differs depending on which of those project types you chose back at the beginning. So for artist residencies, you'll need to talk about the artists who are going to be involved in your project. You'll need to upload a resume for them and also a sample lesson plan from that artist. And it can be a lesson plan for the residency that they're actually going to do with you, or it can be a lesson plan from another previous residency that they have done. You'll also need to provide some samples of their work. And there are some parameters here depending on what kind of medium you are submitting. We also have some links here to help you if you need to resize some images or combine some files into one PDF to attach here. So we've got 3 upload fields for those samples, and you can describe in the text field what you are putting there. We've also got places where you can enter websites if you are linking to someone's YouTube video, for instance. So there's plenty of room there for you to include the work samples from the artist. Then we're looking at the impact of your project. It asks how the project will supplement your programs rather than substituting for your regular arts programming. What is that difference there for the students? If participation fees are charged, how are you making that activity accessible to all the students? And then here's also where you'll talk about the community component of your project. How will they be able to share in what you are doing? Then you'll enter here the number of hours of student-artist contact time. So this would be if you take one individual student from that core group, how long would that one individual student be interacting with whatever this activity is, whether it's a residency or field trip. So if the student was going to be in an hour-long class with the artist every day for a week, that would be 5 hours of student-artist contact time.
On that one, what if there's more than one student? What if
It's still just, there should be more than one student, but you're still only counting how much time would one
they
student
would,
be spending
but
with an
if they're
artist.
going to do multiple, let's say we bring an artist into the art class and they have like 3 different sections during the day. He's going to work with all 3 of those sections, the 7th graders, the 8th graders, and the 9th graders. So he'd be working an hour a day with the 7th graders, an hour a day with the 8th graders, an hour a day with the 9th graders.
Hmm.
So is that just the 3 hours per day?
Nope, it would just be 1 hour per day because
Okay.
it's basically the average time that a representative student would be spending with the artist.
Okay.
Great. All right, let's go back and talk about project outcomes. So you'll need to choose 1 to 3 of these Minnesota Arts outcomes that are here at this link. And we suggest that for this program, you choose number 8 or number 9 as your main outcome. So it's got some outcomes listed here in the areas of arts access, arts education, and arts and cultural heritage. And these 8 and 9 here are the ones that we suggest make the most sense for what you are doing. So these are really just the kind of top level overarching outcomes. And then once you've chosen those 1 to 3 numbers, then you will go in and say, for that outcome that you chose, what are the specific changes that will happen for the students that are participating in your project? And then you will look at how you're going to measure or prove that those changes have taken place. Both how will you gather and document the results, and then what you're going to look for in those results that will show that you have achieved those outcomes. So we have a sample here for you. So it's got just a sample project there, and they chose a couple outcomes here. And so for this outcome that they chose, that higher level outcome, their specific changes they're looking for are here. And then they talk about they're going to do this survey. Here are some of the questions they're asking, and then what they would look for when they have those survey results back are success will be indicated by a more positive attitude towards poetry. And then at the bottom here, this just shows how the text in all of these boxes would translate into what you would enter into the question in the application. So we do have a blank outcomes worksheet for you here. If you want to do that to kind of plan out how that's going to work for your project. And then we've got a space to upload the evaluation tool that you're planning to use. If you have a survey that you're going to use for the students, you can attach that there. And then just some numbers about the number of people that will be participating. So this is where you would add together all of the students in all of those 3 classes that are participating, and that would show the reach of the activity there.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Then we've got a section that's just kind of collecting some data. This is stuff that doesn't have any bearing on your application, but we just pass that on to either the state or Minnesota Citizens for the Arts. So you will just, with some of these questions that have view codes, you'll just click on that and it'll give you some choices, and you'll grab that number and stick that back in here. Then they're asking about some audience numbers again, and these are in a year, how many participate in arts activities that are not part of regular curriculum. So the previous numbers were based on who's participating in this particular project. And this is how many generally participate in activities in a year. Then you've got just some contact information for your project director and your authorizing official. It asks who is the grant writer in case we have questions about the application, who we should contact. And then at the bottom, you've got your electronic signatures by just typing your name in here. This is a great place to use that collaborate button to invite, say, your authorizing official to come in here and sign. So we're just quickly going to look at what happens if we click on different project types. So our arts field trip, the only thing that changes is this artistic quality and merit section. So now it asks us to talk about the institutions, performances, or events that you plan to visit, and you can provide some links to those here. That's the only difference for that one. Then for the juried student art show, again, in that section, it asks for information about the artists who are going to be your jurors, a place to upload their resume, and then also a letter of commitment from them saying that, yes, I am agreeing to do this, and here's how I'm planning to give feedback to those student artists. And there's also a spot if you want to include samples of their work. And then for that prepackaged theater experience, the last one, this one, the budget form is a little different. It allows you to enter in things about ticket sales. They both calculate the same, but it has more that you can do with the project income. So that's different. And then in this artistic quality and merit section, it's asking about the theater company and artists, including their resumes or bios and a lesson plan from them, along with some work samples from them. So that's the difference with depending on which project type you choose. At the bottom here, there is a button to save your application and to submit when you're ready. We're going to save. And when we do that, it gives us a list of everything that we still need to answer, which since we've not done anything yet is everything. And if you wanted to go back and keep working, you would click continue there, but we're going to head back to our dashboard. And you'll see now here is the project that we just started. And to get back into that, you just click edit application here. And then this will be the same place you'll come back to for your contract for your project, your final report. So we are going to head back over to our slides. I'm going to just ask that we save questions for the end just to make sure we get through all of our information here. Here are some tips for you. It is a great idea to start really early working on your application just to make sure you have time to gather everything you need. If you're needing to get resumes and work samples from your artist, if you think you might run into some questions, then you'll have time to get those answered. Make sure to read the guidelines carefully, both the ones for this project and those general grant guidelines. And then as you saw, a lot of the questions have more than one part to them. So make sure that you're getting each of those sub-questions addressed in your answer. As we mentioned before, good to keep your answers clear and concise. Also, definitely feel free to just use everyday language for this application. We're not looking for any special kind of writing. As long as you are explaining clearly what is being planned, that is great. It's also good to assume that the people reviewing the grants don't know anything about you, about your school or your project. Even if this is a project that your school does yearly, the reviewers are instructed to base their scores only on what is in the application. So even if they are aware of or have participated even in your project before, they are not allowed to use that information. So make sure that your application includes everything that they might want to take into consideration when they're scoring. And finally, it's a great idea to have someone proofread your application. There are several ways we can help you with your application. First, it's a great idea to call us to talk about your project before you even start. Make sure you're applying under the right program, that the project you're thinking about is eligible. Then certainly you can contact us anytime with questions as you're working through your application. Then also we can actually review your application for you before you submit it. If you let us know about up to 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we are able to look at it and let you know if there's something that you're missing, if we were looking for a little different focus on one of the questions, things like that. Then, once you submit your application, SMOC staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. And that is our last part of this process. We don't have any say in what gets funded or not. But if at that point we find that there's something still missing from your application, you'll get 48 hours to fix that. Then once everybody has added whatever they need to add to their applications, they'll get sent on to a panel of individuals from around our region who will score and discuss those applications. And that will all be based on the criteria for the grant program that we'll look at in a second. Then everything goes to our SMOC Board of Directors, who will make the final funding decisions based on the recommendations from that grant review panel. So what they will be scoring you on are the artistic quality and merit of the project, which is worth 18 points, the impact on the participants, which is worth 11 points, and the feasibility of the project worth 5 points. And if you go back to that document that was available on our website, there are a lot more details under each of these criteria for you to look at just to get an idea of what those reviewers will be looking for. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete an online contract, and then you will receive 80% of your grant award by the time of your start date, if you've completed your contract on time. And then you'll receive the remaining 20% of your grant award after your project and final report are completed. You'll need to acknowledge the grant on any publicity you have about your project, and we will send you a credit line that you'll need to use depending on which funding source your grant came from. And also depending on that, you may need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo as well. But we will send some posters and logos and credit lines to you, so you don't have to worry about finding the right things. That will all be available for you. Then you'll need to complete a final report within 60 days after your project end date. So with our question before about when you actually have to be done, if your project end date which could be the last day of your activities for your project, is June 30th of 2022, you still have 60 days after that to submit your report. And it's a good idea to look through that report when you're starting your project so you know what kinds of information you're going to need to gather, like some of those attendance numbers and costs and your outcomes. We also do expect that you're going to spend what you said you were going to in your budget. So this is not the time to see, okay, now where can we cut corners and pay less for things. We really need you to spend your whole grant. If it looks like your expenses are going to need to change, you should contact us to get those changes approved. So that was it for information about our Arts in the Schools grants. I'm just going to mention quickly a couple of other opportunities coming up, and then we can open up for any more questions. We have our Art Study Opportunity for Youth grant coming up. Students can apply for this to go to a camp, do a mentorship with a local artist, things like that. There's a webinar for that coming up on February 18th and a deadline March 31st. And then we have our grant support open hours the second Tuesday of the month. These days, those are virtual open hours, so you'll just join on a video call like this. Our next one coming up is January 12th from 11 to 1 p.m. You can sign on anytime during then and talk about whatever you'd like to. Here is our contact information. These days, email is the best way to reach us as we are kind of in and out of the office, but please feel free to contact us anytime with questions. And now if you have any other questions, now is the time.
Say, Carolyn, we're thinking of having a mosaic artist come work with our high school students, both ceramics and stained glass classes, to do projects above and beyond what they're normally used to. You know, we dabble in little mosaics for small projects, but we've never done anything like on a mural scale. So the idea would be to work with those classes with some extended time together. Also reaching out to some other students that want to participate and even some community, possibly parents, I don't know. So the question would be, if the project's going to cost more than the grant, is it okay to get matching funds or additional funds from other entities to make this mural something larger to present into our school systems and or in the community?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, your project can cost as much as you want. You just can only get the certain amount from a
Okay.
SMOC grant.
Okay, sounds good. And then when I saw the date time frame, I didn't know if they started, a portion of it one grant cycle and then started this other portion of the second grant cycle, because the grant is, does have ample time. We were hoping to do it all at once. It would be like a 2-week residency. It would just be, something that it depends on how many. So we don't know with COVID and all that. So that's where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah,
And
but
yeah,
really
and
where it's just the same project, that would just be one grant.
yeah.
But
Okay, sounds good. Then we know how much matching funds we might need as we work
yeah.
through that. I know our artist isn't from Minnesota, but he's willing to pay his own expenses to get here. And so that's why we wanted to do it all in one time frame.
Yeah, so in that situation, if you have someone traveling from out of state, if they're flying, then their plane ticket could not be included. But then if they're renting a car from the Twin Cities and driving down, that could be included since that's
Okay, good to know.
happening in
Okay,
the
as long as it's on
state.
state in Minnesota, correct. Okay, sounds good. That's
Yep.
good to know. Yeah, they're working on that big development at the end of where it's going to be a new plaza. And, we did the grant for the end of Main Street gathering space that we're working on, which was a smaller mural, painted mural. We also had our mural down at Sailboard Beach blew over and it busted it all up. So we do have to replace that one. So we're just trying to decide if this mural could go, if it has to go in a school or if it can go in the community.
I don't think there's any restrictions on where the finished project could end up
Okay.
as long as it's
Okay.
really that kind of extended time in school for the students.
Yeah, definitely. I just need to talk to our city staff too to make sure that, they're on board, and that they would pay the extra funds that it might take so that we can get the artist in residency project to be
Right.
really fulfilling
Hmm.
for our students and have a wonderful piece that they can say they contributed to our community.
Hmm. Anything else I can answer for anyone? Like I said before, feel free to contact us anytime. And thanks for joining us tonight. And we hope we hear from you soon. Have a good night.